Welcome to the Office of Undergraduate Research Education Series. Today's session is on Introduction to Tableau, and our speaker is Dr. Kaylee Alexander. This is a virtual event. It's being recorded, so we ask everyone to mute themselves and turn off their camera to ensure the best experience. And if you have any questions, please use the chat feature, or you can unmute yourself when you're invited by the speaker. And this is the event evaluation. We would love everyone to complete this after the session, but we want to remind the Europe and Wilt scholars you must complete this in order to receive credit for attending today. And the mission of the Office of Undergraduate Research is to facilitate and promote undergraduate, student, faculty, collaborative research, and creative works in all disciplines throughout the U campus. And we would like to acknowledge that this land, which is named for the Ute tribe, is the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. The University of Utah recognizes and respects the enduring relationship that exists between many Indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. We respect the sovereign relationship between tribes, states, and the federal government, and we affirm the U's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities through research, education, and community outreach activities. And now I'd like to introduce today's speakers, Dr. Kaylee Alexander. She's a research data librarian and interim co-director of Digital Matters.
Thank you for that introduction. I also just want to throw my contact information up here right at the start. Again, I'm research data librarian. I'm based in the Marriott Library. And you can find my contact information here. Also sharing the link to my Tableau public profile in case you're interested in taking a look at some of the visualizations that are possible through Tableau. But without further ado, I'll jump right into it. So we're here to talk about data visualization with Tableau, which is a really great storytelling tool. It's a proprietary tool, so it's usually quite expensive, but the benefit of being a student is that you can get Tableau Desktop for free, or if you're a researcher as well. So faculty can also get free licenses. So it has really quality interactive visualization capabilities. You can also create interactive dashboards that can then be published to Tableau Public or embedded in a website, and it really allows you to engage in data storytelling. It's also a highly customizable platform, so even though there's a lot of built-in tools and built-in data visualization types, there's a really great flexibility with it too once you start to get to know it. It's accessible. There's no coding required, which is great. So for folks who aren't used to doing data visualization or who are new to working with data in general, Tableau is a really great way to start getting into that mode. There's also a really great community of data visualization enthusiasts through Tableau Public. You can follow contributors. You can look at their little tricks of the trade. You can usually download workbooks as well and try to copy what they've done. So there's a lot of documentation out there that can help you really make the most of your Tableau usage that we're not going to have time to get into today, but hopefully we can give you a little bit of a taste of it. It's also a really industry standard tool. So it's a great item to put on your CV that you have knowledge of, even if it's just this basic introduction, because it really is used kind of across the industry playing field a lot for marketing and commercial firms. Um, let's see, what else? I tend to use it for humanities-based research, actually. That's my field. I am trained as an art historian, but I work a lot with the digital humanities. So it's also a great tool, again, if you're not per se in the sciences, but you're interested in applying data to your work. There's really two things that you need to know about Tableau. There's two versions. There's Tableau Public, which is always free, and then there's Tableau Desktop, which has a lot of the same functions as Tableau Public, but then extra. The benefit of using Tableau Public, other than it's free, it's easy to share. You can also web author directly through the web without having to download an application onto your machine. The desktop version, however, is preferred if you're working with any sort of private or proprietary data that you don't want immediately shared out on the internet. So Tableau Public, for example, isn't HIPAA compliant. You don't want to put sensitive data out there in any way, whereas the desktop version will only share the data locally to your machine, so it's much safer if you're dealing with anything sensitive. Again, it also has a couple more functions for customizing your visualizations. So today I'm going to be working in Tableau Desktop, and again, that's free for students. You can sign up for a license if you haven't already, and then at the end I'll include information for how to get that if you haven't. Another thing to note about Tableau is that it works best with what we call wide data. So you might think of long and wide data formats. Long data might repeat points and then name the variable with it and give different values, whereas wide data format is quite literally more often wider, where you have each data point and its variables are mentioned in columns rather than running down the rows. But Tableau Desktop also supports a lot of different file types, and knowing just how the data is formatted can really help you do a lot of great things with it. So in addition to standard spreadsheet kind of files like CSVs, Excel, you can also import JSON files, spatial or shaped files if you're doing any sort of mapping. And then it also has, in the desktop version, really great integration with servers like MySQL or Oracle so that you can pull data directly from a larger database and not have to have that data on your machine. Tableau Public, if you're doing web authoring, you can also integrate with Google Sheets without having to download those sheets first and import them into Tableau. Today, we're really going to focus on a live demo of Tableau. So we're going to open up Tableau Desktop and connect to a text-based data set. Then we're going to look at Tableau's user interface and its various key built-in features. I'm going to go over creating simple charts and exporting static data visualizations in case you need to embed them in a paper, for example. And then I want to look at how interactive charts provide quick data insights, especially if you're new to data analysis. Maybe statistics isn't your strongest suit and you just want to grab a couple summary points out. And then I want to talk about some of the more advanced features and opportunities for data storytelling that is involved in Tableau. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing this screen and I'm going to switch over to my Tableau dashboard here. And so I've already got Tableau open, but you're welcome to follow along if you want. Let me actually start from the main screen here. This is the main screen when you open up Tableau. I'm going to drop also a sample data set into the chat. So if you do have Tableau downloaded and you want to follow along with me live while I do this, you can do so. Otherwise, I will share the instructions at the end with the data set, which will also be posted to the website for this workshop so that you can follow along independently if you don't have Tableau already. So let me start just by adding that sample data set to the chat. So today we're going to be working with a more humanistic kind of data set. We're working with characters in the DC and Marvel universes. Simple data set to work with to get to know Tableau. And what you'll notice when you first open Tableau is you have this blue pane here on the left where you can see connect. So that's where you're going to connect to whichever type of data it is that you want to use. Most commonly, it's going to be Excel or a text file like a CSV. Our data today, the DC Marvel data, is a CSV file. So I'm going to go ahead and select text here from that left pane and then select the file from my files, wherever you have that saved to. And I'm going to click open. So it's automatically going to load the data into this main kind of page here where you can see a summary of the source. You'll notice the name of the file up here. You can drop this down. You can edit the connection, which means you can change to a different file if you've selected the wrong one. You can rename the file directly in here. Another thing you can do is you can add an additional data source. I'm not going to get into that now because it gets quite complicated thinking about how data are joined. But if you wanted to add another source, you can connect it to another Excel or text file, really thinking about the same types of data. So if you're working with tabular data, you can connect to another tabular data format. Um, and then you're also going to see a summary of all your variables here, or your fields. So it gives you the kind of tall and wide version, right? You're going to see the field name, where it's coming from. So that's the name of your file. If you had multiple files, you would see multiple field names here, physical table names here, and then kind of the way that it's going to show up as well. It also gives you the type of data, which you can explore further here. So here you can see exactly how your data are formatted with each variable and a sample of what's in there. You can see we've got each DC and marble character listed down with various attributes about them. And then we've got this ABC means that it's a string or a text-based data piece of data, but you can also go in and change it. So for instance, if you're reading something like these binary variables here, 0 or 1, yes or no. They're reading them as numbers because instead of saying true or false, for example, which would show up as a Boolean or binary variable system, it's reading it as a number. And we want to tell it to be read as a string, actually. This way, it's not being used to compute anything, it's just being used as a piece of text, so a yes or no. So for these dummy variables, we're going to go ahead and we're going to increase or change this over to a string. Um, we also can scroll over and see the rest of our variables. So we have our number of appearances, the month and the year in which they first appeared. And here we have just the year, but it's read it as a number. And yes, a year is a number, but we also want it to come up as a date because then we can use it in a time series. So we can change our variable also to a date here. We're going to choose date instead of date and time because we don't actually have a time in there. So we don't want it to assign a random time. We want to choose date. You'll also notice that you can choose geographic roles. So if you were to have like a city or a state or a country in here, even a lot of latitude and longitude, you can specifically assign that role as well to your variable. But like I said, right now we're going to change our appeared year to a date. And it'll default to January 1st, and that's okay because once we get further along, we can say we only want it to show the year. We don't want it to show a day or a month. Another thing that you'll notice up in the upper right is that you have a live and an extract connection. This is a really great feature of Tableau because it works with live data, meaning that whatever file that you bring into this on your machine, you save your Tableau file, you go, you change your data in Excel, for example, or in that CSV, and then you hit save. And then next time you open up Tableau, that data is going to automatically adjust for you. So anytime that you've made visuals within Tableau and you save your workbook, it's going to stay connected to that live data source so that you don't have to recreate your visualizations from scratch. The new data will just come and populate your existing visualizations. If you're sharing it, um, I don't know if I can zoom in on Tableau itself, unfortunately. This is sort of the size that it is. But it'll get bigger once we're in the actual visualization pane. Um, if you're wanting to export to Tableau Public, for example, though, you'll create an extract and that'll capture the data as like a snapshot of what it is at that moment so that when you push the visualization out, that data won't change with any changes that you're making within the file. So you have that option to create an extract, which won't update automatically, or a live connection, which will. Um, see. You can also always use this refresh button up at the top to refresh your data if you've made changes and they're not showing yet. And then you can switch between data sources up here as well. So that's kind of the main interface as a starting point. But when you start working with actual visualizations and trying to create visuals, you're going to go down to the bottom here where it says Sheet 1, and that's going to be your first area where you can start to draft your visualizations. Um, so like I said, Tableau comes with a lot of preloaded visualization types. It's also a drag and drop system, so you don't have to know any coding like R if you're trying to use ggplot, for example. It really is drag and drop simple system. So for this one, we're going to start just looking simply at how many DC and Marvel characters were introduced in each universe over time. So to do this, we're going to look at our tables here. So we've got our main variables all listed out. You can see this line here. It separates dimensions and measures. So measures are going to be anything that's, considered to be a numerical value, variable that might be more computationally used. You can see here, even though we've changed these to strings, these binary variables, it still thinks that they're uh, dimension or measures. So we want to drag them up to our measures field so that it knows that it's not really a measure, it's actually an attribute or a dimension. So you can just drag that up and you can see that orange line appears to say that you're in the right spot. And we'll drag that one up as well. But the number of appearances, that's good. So we're going to start by making our timeline. So we can take our appeared year, which is now showing as a date, and we just drag that variable right over to columns. And you can see it starts populating all of our possible years here along our y-axis, or sorry, our x-axis. And then you see this other variable here, dcmarvel.csv parentheses count. This is just your n, or the number of records, and they call it the name of the file it is. So it's just the number of records, and that's a great tool too that's automatically in. So we can drag that to our rows. And you can see it automatically defaults to a line chart where you can see all the number of characters introduced per year from the 1930s to 2015. And it's recognized that it really only needs the year in there, so it's excluded that month and day. You can also double check that here up in the top where it says year appearance. If you did want to change that, you can drop this little arrow down and you can say, I want to look at month, I want to look at day, week number, etc. So for example, if we looked by quarter, it's not going to change at all because there's no quarter information in there, which is great. If we went by month, again, it's not going to really change because that data is not in there. So it's really smart at picking it up and not making you fumble with it too much. What's another thing that we can do is we can start adding different attributes to our line chart, right? So it's great to know how many comic characters were introduced over time, but we're really maybe interested in comparing how many characters were introduced in each universe, DC or Marvel, over time. And we have that variable in here as well as universe. And we want to create a second line and we want it to be a different color. All we have to do for that is drag universe to this marks card for color. And you can see there's a bunch of different attributes in here. Color, size, you can here like adjust the thickness of your line as well. You can add labels or not. And we'll customize some of those later as well. And then there's tooltips as well, which are going to show you the information that comes up when you hover over a certain point in the data set. But just by dragging that one variable over to color, we can start to see the separation of the two universes over time. One of the things too, we maybe don't like the default colors. One thing that I notice when I see a lot of visualizations created in Tableau, I can always tell if someone's not paid attention to actually honing their visualization if they have this particular shade of blue and orange. So I always recommend that you try to play with the colors. And to do that, you would just click on this color panel. There's options to change the opacity if you want to make the line darker or lighter. You can add points at each interval. You can make it smooth. You can have the default setting, but you can also edit the colors themselves. So when you hit edit colors, It's assigned this blue to DC and the orange to Marvel just kind of randomly. But if you select each of those variables, you can change the color here, and it's got a bunch of automatic color palettes already loaded in, which is great. You can also create custom palettes. So, for example, I've created one with the University of Utah's branding. Um, and that's beyond the scope here. But again, it's that customizability of it. But even if you don't want to use one of their palettes, you can assign specific colors. So, for example, if you're wanting to use a specific branding color that's not preloaded in, you can double click on the color you want to change, and you get all of these different options. So you can pick really specifically which color you want. When you click on the slider option, you can even add the hex color, so that specific code for the color that you want to use um, to change it. So what we want to do here maybe is we want to use the official colors for the Marvel and DC universes. So for DC, we're going to use this color code that I pre-looked up, which is 0476F2. And if we click OK, you see it's automatically going to change it to that DC blue. And we're going to repeat the same for Marvel, changing that hex color to, let's see, it's EC1D24. And we'll click OK. So now we've got very clearly our branded colors here, and we can click Apply, and it'll automatically update the chart. And then we can click OK to close that out. We can start adjusting things like axis labels and titles as well to start to hone and refine that visualization. So let's say we want to change this from count of the name of the file because that's kind of messy. We can double click on the axis or right click and click edit. And you can change the title here from you can just select the custom option and change it as well. So let's call this, well, we don't actually have to call it anything. It's obvious that it's a count, so we can even leave that off, leave that blank. And then, or we can edit and say something like number of characters. And we click out of that, it'll adjust there as well. Another thing we have up here is the title. It just says the name of the sheet by default, but we want to give the visualization a title that actually mimics what we're showing here. So you can double click on the title and you get this pop-up with uh, different ways of customizing the title. So we might call it, for example, number of Marvel versus DC characters over time. And you can change the font, the size, you can make it bold, and then apply that and click OK. And now your title has changed as well. We'll get in shortly to other ways of formatting text globally throughout the document, so you don't have to change it every time if you're changing those styles. But for now, that'll suffice. We also can adjust this axis here. The title, we can do right click, edit axis, and change the name to year, for example. You can also choose to remove the axis if you don't want it showing the header at all. That's not very helpful here because we want to know that it's year, so we can click this back button and that'll undo. You can also use like a Command Z to undo things. There's also null values here. That might be because there's some blank cells or blank rows in the data set. You can choose to filter that out so it gets rid of that indicator. It doesn't have any effect here on the actual visualization itself, but that marker is kind of in the way, so you can get rid of it. And then you've got your legend over here automatically set up as well. So if you're happy with this visualization, it's really easy to export it. You can go up into the menu and select Worksheet from the top. And then the third option there is Export, and then select Export as Image. And then you have an option for exporting it as well. You can include or exclude the title. The view is the visualization itself. So you usually want to include that. You can choose to include or not include the legend, and then also choose how you want that legend to appear next to your visualization. Another thing that I often do is I'll export these different elements separately and then position them in a more customized way, depending on the type of document I'm using. But if you're looking for just a quick export, to have the information to plop into a paper, this is a really great option. You can also include or not include a caption. The caption is automatically generated. It's usually not very helpful, so I don't recommend that. I usually recommend creating your own caption in whatever document it is that you're creating. Um, but then you have a bunch of options there. And when you click save, you also have a number of options for what type of image you can export as. So you can export it as a PNG or a JPEG, which is great. But you can also export it as an SVG or a vector graphic so that you can export it and bring it into something like Illustrator or InDesign and be able to customize it even further, to be able to scale it up in size. That's really great if you're looking to print these visualizations as well, because you can get quite a large image without distorting any of the visual aspects of it. So I'm not going to save this one, but you can mess around with that after the workshop if you're interested too. Let's take a moment to look into some other features here if we want to create a new visualization, because line charts are kind of boring, so we can get a little bit more interesting. So to create a new visualization entirely, there's this, I know it's very small and I apologize for that, this button at the bottom of the screen with a little plus. And there's two more, which we'll get to at the end. But to create just a new sheet like you have here, you can either right-click on the existing sheet and duplicate it, which is great if you're looking to just make some minor adjustments. You can also duplicate it as a crosstab, which means it's going to transform that visualization into a table. So if you just need the numbers quickly, this is a great way to use Tableau as an exploratory tool and not have to stare at your spreadsheet. This is kind of hard to look at, but you can change the orientation this way to have a more readable file. And you can also export these tables to Excel. So if you need to have a different analytics software after, you can also use that. Another way to create I'm going to delete that one for now, but you can also create just a new sheet by clicking this plus button at the bottom, and you're going to have a fully new worksheet to work in. Here, I'm still interested in kind of development of these universes, but this time I want to look at the number of appearances, maybe. So the number of times that a given character has appeared throughout their time in the DC universe. So for this, I'm going to grab one of our measures, appearances, and I'm going to drag that number to rows and drop that in. A lot of times too, if you double click, it'll default to a location, and then you can drag between the two if it goes in a spot that you don't want it to. But sometimes it's easier to just drag it directly in there. Then I want to think about the year in which these characters appeared again. So I'm going to take that to columns. Remember, our good visualization practice is that year should always be along the x-axis. We don't read timelines from top to bottom. We read them from left to right. So that's going to be your columns field here. And now we can see the number of appearances over time for each character based on when they first appeared. I want to drag universe to color again because I want to see that differentiation between DC and Marvel. So I'm going to do that. And you can see it's maintained my color scheme from the previous. So now anytime you use that universe variable throughout this project book, it's going to default to the correct colors. This is really good for maintaining consistency in your projects as well. So again, we've got this line chart, number of appearances made by DC characters according to the year in which they were first introduced. And if we hover over this top peak, we can get a couple of insights that in 1963, all the characters that appeared in that year, there were 25,000 plus appearances of Marvel characters. This information is interesting, but it doesn't really tell us what's actually going on. Doesn't really talk about who these outliers might be. So we want to really look at this at an individual level. We want to see this based on the specific character. So to do that, we want to deaggregate the data. We want to make it less summarized. So we go up into our analysis bar here, and that second option is aggregate measures, and you can see that it's checked, which means that it's aggregating or summarizing the data. If we click that off, it'll take a second, it'll start to do some other things. And this is also definitely not readable. It's still not telling us which characters this is, but we're going to get there. We do have the name of each character, so this is a great time to add that in. So we can drag that over to detail in this marks card, and when we do that, you're going to see now that we have one dot for each character in each of these universes. And if you hover over, it'll tell you, okay, well, that outlier, it was Spider-Man. He's made 4,000 appearances since this is his first appearance in 1962. Here we've got Iron Man, Wolverine, Superman. You can start to see a little bit more detail in what you're doing. You'll also be able to change the shape here. So maybe you don't want to use a circle, which is the automatic option. You can choose, for instance, a square and see these little squares for each character, which is a little bit more readable. Um, you can also choose shapes here, and you can change to custom shapes, for example, an open circle, a star. You can add even more shapes in here. You have different sort of palettes or collections of shapes, and you can also create custom palettes for shapes. Again, beyond what we can do today, but a good possibility to know. If you wanted to use logos, for example. I'm going to stick with the square because I think that's a little bit easier to read. We can also adjust the size, make those squares a little bit bigger, separate them out. Um, and we're starting to get somewhere now. Another great thing you can do to use Tableau as an exploratory tool is if you right click on a specific point, you can see this option to view data. And when you view the data, you get a great pop-up that's going to show you all the information that's in the graph, but you can also show all fields and full data, and it'll give you the full information about that given data point. So if we select all here, you can see it'll let us scroll over further. You can see, whether or not they're still alive, what color eyes they have, whether they're male or female or something else, the color hair, etc., etc. So that allows you to say, okay, I have this outlier showing in my data. What is that outlier actually doing, and what are some of the other variables that might contribute there? So I'll X out of that. This is a little bit muddy though at the bottom because there's a lot of overlapping data. One great way to deal with that is to use our opacity option in the color pane so we can adjust down a little bit and you can start to see dense clusters a bit more. You don't want to make it too light that these end up disappearing. So let's settle, for example, on 50%. And then you can see a little bit more that there's a lot of data clustered down in the bottom here and not so much up top. But it also allows you to distinguish between these other areas a little bit better as well. Things are still a bit unclear though, because that x-axis only shows us decades rather than distinct years, or is showing us the data's a little bit smushed together, right? So what we want to do here is drop down. Actually, it did default correctly. But you can change it, for example, it's showing every 5 years here. That one's actually not bad. We can leave that the way it is. So we can also change how much of the visualization is showing. We can fit to the width, we can fit the entire height, or we can make sure the entire view is showing. Here we're good. We're going to hide this indicator for the nulls because we don't need to know that information. We can also expand our pane here to make it a little bit more visible, or even drag our legend up top to kind of take it out of the way and make it easier to see between each of these. We also maybe want to label some of these so we don't have to hover over them. This is especially useful if you're planning to export the visualization. So here you can click on our label option and click show mark labels. And right now it's giving you the count, but to fix that, we're going to drag our name variable to label instead. And now you can see that it's showing the name of the character rather than just a number. You can also adjust your label. You can see here it's just showing the variable name, but if you click on these three dots for more information, you can also add additional variables in by dragging them to that label as well. And again, you can just to make it bold, italics, whatever's going to be most legible. We can make it a little bigger here as well. Maybe 12 is good. And you can see it's got it only for a couple, which is great because one option is allow labels to overlap. And if you click that off, it's going to show a lot of different labels or no labels. Right now, it's still thinking because there's so much to process. And then it's going to be really, really messy. You're not going to see anything that's going on. So you don't want the labels to overlap, but you do maybe not want to include all of these here. So to get rid of some of this noise, you can drag over a selection within the visualization, for example, like that, and then right click and go down to mark label and say never show. And then it's never going to show unless you were to go back in and say, oh, I want to turn that one on to always show. So then you can have just a couple of your points labeled, and you can just use the rest as kind of reference points. And if you're just highlighting our outliers here. Another thing that we can do is we can change the way the numbers are showing here on our x-axis or y-axis. So if you go into, you're going to right click on the axis and do format, you can change the way the numbers are. So these are all pretty much in the thousands. So maybe we don't have to have 4,000 written out. We just want to write, for example, 4K. We can do a custom number or we can do a number custom that's a standard. You can change the number of decimal places you want to show. You can decide whether or not you want to, how you want to show negative values. And then you can also change it to show in units. So here we're going to click thousands, and then you can see it summarizes it down. So you just see 1K, 2K, 3K, and 4K. And that, again, just makes it a little bit less busy and easier to read. I talked about kind of formatting things in bulk, and that's the last thing that I really want to focus on is that formatting capabilities for the entire workbook, and then we'll get into questions, and I'll share again the extended guidelines, which have a couple more exercises for exploring different types of visualizations as well. You can click anywhere in the visualization, right click, and select format. And then you're going to get on your left side here a whole pane with options of how you can format your worksheets. Fonts. So for example, you can say, I want everything in the worksheet to use Verdana. And that'll just change all of the worksheet features. You want to change the tooltip or the pop-up text. You can also change that. Let's just say trebuchet for argument's sake, and then it's going to change it for everything. The title as well. You can update here, bold, you can make it larger, you can change the color, you can make the colors match your visualization itself. And then you can also go on the row or column level, meaning that you're only going to affect the fonts for either the y-axis or the x-axis independently. It's not just the font that you can change here. You can change the orientation of everything. So you can say, I want everything centralized, which will change the position in relation to each point. You can turn your text on its side, not always super helpful, but an option if you need it. You can change it to centered on the dot or above the dot. Um, and then you can also even move these around independently if you need to adjust something just slightly. You can also change the color of your worksheet. So if you want a more dark background uh, or just something other than white, you can change that there. Um, you can also adjust your grid lines, something that I like to do quite often. I think that you don't always need all the grid lines. This one's not too bad, but if you wanted to, for example, remove all of the lines, you could do that as well by shutting them off here. Um, and then another section for lines. More grid lines, turn them off. You can get rid of your zero line. You can change the way the zero line is showing up, change how thick it is, for example. So there's a lot of ways to kind of tweak the visualization and get a really clean look out of it without having to do much work. If you know that there's certain fonts that you're going to be using throughout all of the sheets on your visualization project, you can also go up into the formatting tab on the top menu bar, and there is an option there to set the workbook theme. There's some modern options that'll just make it look like a default kind of visualization that you might encounter in a academic paper. Um, and then you can also set it to a classic version. So there's a lot of options here also that are just built in for change. Um, you can also, sorry, uh, change your fonts, alignment, shading, colors, all of that can be changed globally by working in this formatting workbook option. And then finally, as one point, we wanted to mention some future capabilities of Tableau. And one of the great things about it is that you can combine your visualizations into a dashboard. So the second option here next to Sheet is for dashboards. And there you're going to see all of the individual visualizations that you created previously, and you're able to drag them into a dashboard so they can be shown side by side. You can have one legend for everything. You can have it set automatically to kind of tile it, or you can even, if we go back, remove those, you can do it as a floating so that you have more flexibility in the size and placement of your visualizations in relation to one another. And when you get to this stage too, one of the things you can activate is interactive filters. So, say you wanted to use your basic line chart as a filter, you can do that by clicking this filter on. And then if you were to click here, it would automatically filter the data in a visualization that has those same variables. I know this was a lot to start, and Tableau has a lot of really interesting capabilities. It is way more than I could possibly cover in an hour's time. So I would encourage you to explore, to download the guidelines that I'm going to provide now, test it out with this other data. The guidelines will take you through also making box plots, tree charts and tree maps, pie charts. So all different types of visualization opportunities there. I'm also available for consults on Tableau. So if you have a specific project that you're working on and you need to get some help making it happen, that's one of the things that I'm available to do. So one of the questions we got were benefits of other options. So the benefits of Tableau over things like Excel or Prism. There's nothing wrong with using Excel or Prism. They're great tools. What's good about Tableau over them is that there's way more customization options. You can, for example, you can export things a lot easier than you can with Excel. Prism, I'm not super well versed in, so I can't speak so much to that, but you can embed these in websites, you can print them out, you can do more interactive work than Excel for sure. It's not the only option on the market. There's many other visualization tools. I like Tableau because it has this community support around it as well. There's a lot of people who have created hacks for getting Tableau to do more advanced charts like Sankey diagrams or sunburst charts and radar charts that are not built-in features, but can really be used in interesting ways. It's also, again, that industry standard. We see a lot specifically of marketing related industries using Tableau. It's a Salesforce product, so it integrates really well. And it's a great tool to have in your back pocket just in case it comes up. Recently in the library, for example, we hired someone who is specifically trained in Tableau because that's how we put out our reporting as well. So I hope that helps. Which file formats can you input? Lots of file formats. So I did cover this in the beginning, but I'll go back to that slide quickly. So you can use any kind of text file like a CSV or a TSV, Excel. You can also import JSON files, spatial files in various formats, and then you can integrate directly with your server. So lots of different options. I think you can also import with a PDF. I don't know how useful that is, but if that is useful, that's an option as well. Are there built-in tools to note statistical trends, differences in fluorescence intensity and cell count distributions? So for those specific use cases, I'm not familiar with those, but there are statistical trends that you can note in Tableau. You can add trend lines, and then you can add clusters in based on the data, and then you can also export the statistical definitions there too, so it'll provide R and P values, for example. It will also tell you how clusters are being formed, and then you can adjust them based on your own models. So it does provide a lot of statistical insights as well. Tips and tricks for creating good visuals. I like having presets in Tableau. So I do create a lot of custom palettes. For example, I showed my University of Utah palette. So that's preloaded in there, so I don't really have to think about the colors that I'm going to use for visualizations. I also have certain icons that I might have preloaded in, templates that I use over and over again. And a lot of people also, again, they publish their templates to Tableau Public. So if you see a visualization on there that you like, it's often pretty easy to download the workbook and just swap out the data source to use some of their visualization styles to apply them to your data.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Alexander. We truly enjoyed this. It's very informative. I want to remind everybody to complete the event evaluation, but specifically the Europe and Wilkes scholars. They must complete this in order to get credit for attending today. And we just want to remind everybody that the Office of Undergraduate Research, we're located in the Sales Center, which is just across the parking lot from the Student Union. We're open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Our website is our.utah.edu, and you can email us at our@utah.edu. So thank you again, Dr. Alexander. We truly appreciate this.